So the plan this morning, we've got lots going on this morning. So as I just pull up my little agenda, we are going to hear from the lovely Rory Cellan-Jones. Rory, give us a wave. There he is in West Ealing in London. Is it sunny where you are, Rory?
It's nothing like as good as it is in San Francisco right now, or Carlisle, as far as I can see.
There's a really good representation across the county on this call every week. So it looks like it's sunny everywhere. Phil's got its curtains pulled specially to keep the bright sunshine out in Carlisle. So we're going to hear from Rory, who is, until very recently, the BBC's technology correspondent. And he's written a great book about it all as well. And I happened to bump into him, even though Rory and I have both done about 2,000 years at the BBC together. We'd not actually met, apart from probably on an ISDN line, a radio line, when I was working at 5 Live, and we put him on in the morning to do a two-way about this, that, and the other. But as ever with the BBC, 21,000 people, we'd not actually met until we met at Keswick a few weeks ago at Theatre by the Lake, where Rory was talking about his book, At Words by the Water. And I did a little turn with him on stage, which was great fun. And so I just thought I'd grab him back to talk about it again a bit more, and with a bit more of a cultural arts thing that we'll get into as well. So we're going to hear from Rory. Conrad Lynch and Deborah Lydon are going to talk to us about what Team have been doing. That's an arts consultancy based just outside Penrith that you may well know about. We're going to hear from Andrew Deakin from Full of Noises. Andrew, give us a wave. There he is. Got some lovely Dawn Chorus sounds to share with you, because it's the World Dawn Chorus Day about to happen this weekend, which Andrew and his colleagues have been getting involved in once again. And then the Forage Festival is taking place at Windermere Jetty. Emily Edwards, give us a wave, Emily. There she is. She is from the Knotted Project, and they've put together a really great looking festival that I'm hoping to get to on Sunday at the Windermere Jetty Museum. So Emily's going to tell us about that as well. So quite a lot to get through this morning, and nice to have you all with us to experience that. And do chip in with questions, observations, bung stuff into chat as ever. So let's kick off with Rory Cellan-Jones. Rory, it's really lovely to have you with us. I'm just going to give a bit of blurb about Rory. He's a well-known figure on the radio, the telly, and online. He was BBC News technology correspondent, as I mentioned, until the end of last year, 40 years with the corporation. He's had a ringside seat to some of the most extraordinary leaps in human progress during that time, from the birth of the web to the launch of Apple's iPhone and the first driverless cars. He's interviewed all the countless visionaries that we know about: Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Tim Berners-Lee, and obviously there's Elon Musk taking over Twitter. If that's going to happen, it's a fascinating story of this week. Might get into that. And a couple of years ago, he announced on Twitter that he'd been diagnosed with early Parkinson's disease as well. Always On, which is the book that he's written that came out last year. It's a great account of that era and Rory's take on where it leaves us all. So we might touch on a bit of that first of all. But Rory, first of all, I suspect you're a journalist first and foremost, and technology was probably an interest that came to you sort of not necessarily right at the start of your career. Is that fair?
You're right. I always had a bit of imposter syndrome at the start when I started covering technology. So here's my dreadful confession. I didn't do a science degree. I didn't have any contact with computers until actually probably the most significant early contact I had with computers was when I got my first job in the BBC London newsroom, having started in Look North in Leeds. Very, buzzy place, television newsroom in 1983, 1984. And we went out on strike over computers because we weren't going to have these awful things that were going to, take away our jobs and so on and so forth. But then I quickly got to love computers. Bought a key moment was buying the first family computer. I got left by a relative £2,000 in 1995. Bought a Mac Performer 630, a printer and a modem, and hooked the modem up. And the family, my wife and I, and our then 5-year-old son, gathered round it and looked on in wonder as I found my way to the Louvre's website, which was one of the very first websites, and a painting animated onto the screen line by line. It's difficult to remember how slow that was in those days, but how magical an experience it was to feel connected to that world of information in those sort of innocent days. And then I was a business correspondent at the BBC, And all the most exciting business stories in the 90s, the late 90s certainly, were about the rise of the dot-coms, the new technology era. So I flung myself at that, and eventually the BBC surrendered and made me technology correspondent.
Never look back. The book Always On that you wrote starts very specifically with the launch by Apple of their iPhone back in, what year was that? 2000?
January 2007.
Okay. And you know, and there's a great bit in there about how you got the piece on film and got a picture of the phone which no one wants to give you. But do you think the technology story started when the iPhone was invented in some ways?
The technology story didn't start, but a new age started. So the internet came along in the 1970s and 80s. It was a military project. The ARPANET, created in the United States. In its early stages, it was an academic thing. It was universities that knew about it. Then in 1991, Tim Berners-Lee released the code for the World Wide Web, and that is what turned the internet into a more accessible thing, and kick-started that whole dot-com revolution. So that was kind of like, people used to call it Web 1.0. But what happened with the iPhone was that was the dawning of the smartphone era. I'm slightly creeped out, Tom, but because you've gone frozen. But I'm sure you're
still here. I'm still here.
You're back. You're back. It was that cup of coffee. It was as if you drunk poison. Yeah. So that day in San Francisco was amazing because it was an extraordinary performance by Steve Jobs. And I, being a cynical old British hack, at first was a bit, oh, please, when he said, we're going to make some history here today. But the truth is, he did make some history. There had been smartphones before, but they'd been completely inaccessible, completely too complicated. And when, the first of these came along, it introduced people to the idea of that phones were the route to this new era. They weren't about making phone calls or texts anymore. They were about experiencing that full richness of online life, whether you liked it or not. So that ushered in really this new era. And in the book, I basically combine the phone with the rise of the social networks, because if you think a lot of things happened in a hurry. 2004 Facebook was born, 2005 YouTube came along, 2006 Twitter was born, and then 2007 the iPhone comes along, and they all combine together to create this incredibly powerful force that changed so many aspects of our lives.
People reflecting on chat about experiences of computers and where you can do things and whatever. I think with the arts and culture, Rory, and I think you're going to the theatre tonight, is that right?
I'm going to Jerusalem if I've got this great friend who goes to the theatre a lot. Her daughter, she's supposed to be taking, her daughter is 8 months pregnant and is a bit nervous about going. So I am first reserve. I'm hoping that the daughter does want to stay at home.
A bit of jeopardy. In your view, technology and the arts and culture, where has the cross? What's happened? What's technology done to affect the arts and culture sector? What's the impact that it's had on it, and has that been a positive thing, and has it expanded our horizons? Where are you on that?
Well, let's talk about one simple area, photography. Obviously technology has done extraordinary things in democratizing lots of areas of life. It's democratized journalism. Anyone can be a journalist. It's completely changed photography because I sometimes, I'm trying to remember what had happened, and I go back through my archive of photos, my Mac photos albums, and they're incredibly thin. They start in about 2004. And then from 2007, 2008, when I began to take pictures with a smartphone, they explode. And there are an awful lot of terrible photos, but there are some pretty good ones. And they chart my life. And a lot of people have become used to doing that. There's a lot of creativity gone into that. If you think of something like Instagram, which was born just as a sort of a filter app, effectively. So it's unleashed a lot of creativity. Now, that's not an unalloyed good, because there's a tidal wave of rubbish, and finding it's still quite difficult for the quality to fight its way to the top. I mean, we got very excited about the concept of citizen journalism. I remember doing some piece about it in 2004, going to South Korea, where there was a whole movement of citizen journalism that anyone could be a journalist, which of course they can now. But in recent years, we've seen that often means, anyone can be a purveyor of misinformation and lies and propaganda. So I think we're slightly coming back to the idea that there are values, and there's quality journalism, and there is a tidal wave of nonsense as well. And I suspect that maybe to a lesser extent that's true in other branches of culture.
Yeah. I'll come back to people who might have some questions for you shortly. But can I explore with you before we do that? You've spoken to most of this, the visionaries, the tech visionaries, the tech inventors in your time behind the wheel of the technology correspondent gig. Who are the ones that have stuck out for you? Who are the ones that impressed you the most? Who are the ones that perhaps underwhelmed? And what's your view about the lad who wants to take over Twitter?
Well, I was going to say, let's cut through, because you really want to talk about Elon Musk. That's what everybody wants to talk about. So yeah, I've interviewed a lot of them. I mean, in my early stages, it was pretty dire, because people who have built computer companies, and that was the sort of main area I was looking at earlier on. So 20 odd years ago, I used to go to something called Comdex in Las Vegas, which was a computer industry convention. And it was kind of, find the person who does not look at his shoes while you're interviewing him, and can speak in sentences that anyone outside the industry might understand, and that was almost impossible. A lot more colourful people emerged as the sort of as the tech industry became such a big thing. I mean, obviously Steve Jobs was an unusually great communicator, and crafted those keynote performances within an inch of their lives. And his staff lived in terror that if anything went wrong during one of those keynotes, they would be destroyed. I only interviewed him a couple of times, and it was in a very sort of formal, you've got 5 minutes to ask 2 questions way. But Elon Musk stands out as an experience, because I spent 3 months promising my bosses that I would get an interview and lobbying for the interview, and thought it wasn't going to happen. And then it did happen, and I drove from Las Vegas to LA in a Tesla to do the interview. So there was a lot of kind of excitement around it. And he wasn't so well known then. It was 2016. We interviewed him in this sort of design lab, which was a kind of James Bond villain lair, with future Teslas covered in black sheets, so we couldn't see them, and lots of iMac computers with designers having intense conversations around them. And then we spent hours setting up, and then this rather shambling figure appeared, seemed rather low key, and I thought, this isn't going to work. And then he started talking about when we become a multi-planet species. And I thought, this is going to work. And he gave a very interesting and colorful interview. But even then, I wrote a blog about it afterwards and said, Elon Musk, bonkers but brilliant. And his PR man was very upset and said bonkers was a disrespectful word. And I tried to explain that two nations divided by a common language, and bonkers was a term of affection in the UK, but that didn't wash. But even then, and it's become ever more apparent, he was a flawed genius. I mean, he's a man who makes extraordinary predictions, many of which don't come true. On the other hand, he's a man that's built two incredible life-changing businesses, world-changing businesses, Tesla and SpaceX. But now he wants to control one of the more important social platforms, and I have all sorts of concerns about that, I have to say.
Just quickly, such as?
Well, I don't think he's going to work, for one thing. I think he an old colleague of mine, Aditya Chakraborty, wrote a big column about it the other day, saying he's basically the world's biggest troll, which he is. But I also think he's strangely, he's not thought it through. I've just listened to Nadine Dorris being interviewed, who says, well, Twitter's got terms of service which ban racist abuse and this and that and the other, and all we're going to do is try and make sure it keeps to those terms of service. Well, that doesn't fit with what Elon Musk is proposing, which is anything that is legal goes. And the fascinating thing about Nadine Dorris's new online safety bill, which I think has got huge problems, is that it puts a duty of care on the social media platforms about material that is legal but harmful. And that is going to cover a lot of stuff that's likely to appear on Twitter if Elon Musk carries through his philosophy. So there's the potential there for a huge clash.
Yeah. Yes, our esteemed culture secretary has got some interesting issues in her in tray, and the way that she deals with them is quite an interesting way of doing it as well. Some questions are coming in. If you've got a question, stick your hand up or stick it up electronically. Rosie asks, does art lead technology, or does technology lead art at present?
Oh my God, that
what a great question.
I feel like I've gone back 40 years to a tutorial question. Does art lead technology? No. But all the most interesting things that happen are kind of multidisciplinary, and I'm going to do a classic politician's thing and say that's interesting, but I'm going to answer a different question. There's a huge movement at the moment, kind of understandably, to promote the teaching of STEM subjects and to get kids coding, and to in some senses play down the humanities and say they're not important. But a really interesting guy I know who from the games industry wrote a big report for the government called Next Gen about getting Britain the right skills, and he is passionate that it's the combination of skills of you need. In a games company, for instance, you need people with an arts background, and you need coders and physicists and so on. And it's that multidisciplinary world that is so rich. So it's the marriage between arts and technology which can be so fruitful.
And it's interesting here in Cumbria. It's an ongoing debate as well, because in Cumbria we've got such. Particularly in West Cumbria with Sellafield and with Barrow Shipyard in South Cumbria, and also quite a lot of industry on the West Coast. You know, we have this debate on this forum from time to time about how do we help children and young people experience the arts a bit more and be inspired to think about arts as a career, when actually they're being screamed at quite a lot of the time. It's about industry, it's about making stuff, it's about technology. So the whole STEM debate is an interesting one, I think, here, particularly in Cumbria.
Yes, and I think it's sort of people are beginning to wake up to the fact that, for instance, learning to code is a great thing, but it's about a way of thinking. It's not it's not a kind of, because it's quite likely that the coding language you might learn today will be completely redundant in a few years' time. Plus, computers may be coding themselves without any need for an intervention from human beings. So it's more about, it's great crossovers with, you know, philosophy and logic and things like that. So it's more complex than science on this side, the arts on the other.
Yeah. Amy, come off mute and just talk about the printing.
Oh, you froze for a bit there, Tom. Yeah, it's just got sort of an interesting point. And I think Andrew just made a point about not being able to pull apart culture and technology, because when you actually think about it, I mean, the printing press, but going back even further, you know, the use of stone tools, brushes to paint with, any technology. We don't really think of arts and crafts as being, you know, led by technology, but they are, you know, any kind of art and craft has some sort of tool that you use with it. And I suppose it's just intermingled really. And it's not a question, but it's just really interesting to think about that.
That printing press is a bad idea. It's going to give people access to information.
If anybody else wants to chip into the conversation, just chip in or raise your hand. Rory, what next for, you know, if you go back to the start of your book and start of the iPhone, 2007, I think it was. So that's what, 15 years ago. You know, can you look into your crystal ball about where technology is going?
Well, everybody asks that, and I have two answers normally. The first is more of the same. I mean, there have been two major forces in the last 15 years. First, the smartphone, and then the rise of AI, or what's called machine learning, which is a division of AI. And I think an awful lot has still got to play out from those two forces. You know, we're finding more and more new ways to use smartphones. I'm writing a lot about health and technology at the moment. And there's great hopes that, you know, all the sensors in these things can be used to monitor our health better. The other way of looking at it is, you know, do we believe Mark Zuckerberg's vision of the metaverse? This sort of very pervasive, engrossing virtual world that he reckons we're all going to be living in. I'm skeptical. A lot of people are skeptical. But one route to that is through different technology, which is kind of smart glasses that would either take you into a virtual world or overlay digital artifacts on the real world, what's called augmented reality. And we've had attempts at that already with Google Glass, which I wore for 3 months until everybody said I looked like an idiot and stopped. But there's a lot of work going on in that area. So I think there will be more attempts to build the metaverse, but nobody's really come up with a compelling reason why millions of us will want to spend time there. I was at a dinner of technology people the other night, and we were all making the point that when you first experience virtual reality, it's kind of wow. And then maybe the second time it's, yeah, that's quite good. And the third time it's meh. People quite easily tire of it. So I think there are big challenges to making that work.
Jill has got her hand up. Jill, come off mute and tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, I've put into the chat when I was teaching when design technology first came into the curriculum. And we were thinking in terms of curriculum, how that fitted between, say, physics and art.
Yeah.
And discovered that, of course, actually, they're all part of the same process. It's the creativity that's there, and you devise the tools that will enable you to express whatever's in your head, whether it's a scientific experiment or painting a picture. And that was a really interesting thing. And in relation to what you were saying, Rory, about the metaverse, I keep thinking about E.M. Forster's short story, The Machine Stops. When everybody was living in isolated, people are kind of living in isolated little areas, and the machine breaks down, and they've all been living basically virtually, and then they come out into the open. And the thing that seems important to me is that if you're going to be an artist of any kind, you have to be in the sensory world. You can't be living in a virtual world.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose a lot
Although
of it
art is virtual. to some
yeah, a
extent.
lot of it is a matter of definitions. I mean, what are we living in here? Um, I, I met somebody the other day that I've been sort of working with over the last few months, and it took me quite some time. She sent me a note yesterday saying how good it was to see you in real life for the first time, and I thought, do you know, I didn't realize that was the first time we'd met in the real world, because I'd got used to seeing you on screen and thought I knew you already. So there is a certain amount of bleeding between the two already going on.
But the bleed between the two is what's in your head.
Yeah.
Time for one more question, and that's going to come from Rosie Galloway-Smith. Rosie, off you go. You just come off mute there, Rosie.
Yeah, hi. No, I just wanted to say, you know, we're talking about like technological tools, and we've also in the chat been talking about like traditional tools. And I think it's interesting, the idea of, do the tools, when people let the tools lead the project, or whether they let their imagination lead the project. You know, like you say, then there's a new technology, the first time it's used, it's like, wow, when you see it everywhere and all the adverts have the same effect on them and this, that, and other, and then it pulls quite quickly. And I think that's something that creativity has to keep an eye out for, is that kind of just falling into the gimmick stage of new
and
technology.
it's interesting that people take technology in directions that the companies that invent it that never expect. I mean, on a very simple level, text messages were invented as a sort of back channel for engineers working on mobile phone networks. Nobody thought that they would use them. And of course, they then became incredibly powerful. When 3G came along in like 2001, 2002, it was marketed as all going to be about video calls, and it didn't take off then, and it really took. It was almost, you know, that we needed a pandemic to show us that we all really needed video calls. It did take off eventually, but things appear unexpectedly and at a different pace from what technology companies plan.
One final one that's come from Phil in chat, Rory. It's a big one. Do you think Elon Musk will achieve its goal of making us a multi-planet species? And can technology help us with the climate emergency here on Earth?
Well,
final thoughts on those?
Yeah, the latter, obviously, it's got to. I mean, because technology has got to be the answer to in some form to all of the challenges we face, and that one in particular. And there's a lot of investment going on into it, and a lot of awareness, and great things have been achieved when you think of how just the economics of wind power have been radically transformed over the last 15 years. I actually came up to Cumbria in about 2007 to do a report on opposition to wind farms and doubts about the economics of offshore wind, and how it was never really going to work. And of course, it has massively worked. So yeah, technology's got to be a big part of the answer to climate change. No, I don't think Elon's right about us becoming a multi-planet species, certainly not in the near future. It's kind of, he does make these predictions. So when I interviewed him in 2016, he had just got a new app called Summon, which allowed you to summon your car out of the garage to come to you. And he said, that's nothing. One day, your car will be in New York, you will be in Los Angeles, and it will drive itself across the United States, stopping to recharge itself at various points and come all the way to you. And I said, yeah, but that's going to be years away. And he said, no, within the next 2 years. And that was 2016. And I don't think it's happened yet. So he's a great visionary, but a lot of his visions, their timescale at least is slightly dubious.
That's kind of reassuring to know. That's your take on him. He's certainly a big mouth and a big character. we shall watch with interest what he does with Twitter. Rory, thank you very much for your time this morning. That's been really interesting listening to that conversation. Thanks to everyone for questions there as well.
Thank
looks
you.
like Jill's cat is interested in the conversation too, which is always nice to see. And I hope the Jeopardy will he won't he go to the theatre tonight resolves itself in due course with the lady who's 8 months pregnant. Lovely to see you, Rory. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Right, well, let's go to the Eden Valley, and we're going to go to hear from Conrad Lynch now, who looks after Team. And they've been busy doing all sorts of bits and bobs and working, I think, in partnership with the Eden District Council as well. So before we go to Full of Noises and some lovely dawn chorus sounds with Andrew Deakin, Conrad, if you'd like to tell us what you've been doing and what's happening in your part of the world.
Oh yeah, thanks, Tom. My colleague Deborah is also on this yes. call, and yeah, we've been working over the past just over a year with Eden District Council primarily on looking at their arts and culture programme and the plans for arts and culture. And as with everything, you start with one idea that we think we're going to write a large strategy and come up with a huge dossier, and things have changed, and we have done a lot of activity, and we have just come up with a programme of funding, which I know Deborah's got to scoot off, so I will let Deborah start just to kind of give a bit of context around the research and reports that we have done with Eden District Council and the funding streams, which, assuming that there's no callback from the District Council, that will be confirmed, I think it is, on Monday, that will kind of roll out over the next year. So I'll hand over to Deborah.
Thanks, Conrad. Two apologies, one for having to leave quite sharpish at 10:15, and the other for the quality of my microphone. I hope you can hear me. If you can't, then just wave your hands violently and I'll try and do something about it.
You're okay, Deborah, you carry on.
Good. It's a technology issue. So as Conrad said, we've been working with EDC for just over a year, and in parallel with the programme of work that Conrad's been looking after, I've been sort of leading on mapping the provision across the district. EDC were very keen to increase arts and culture provision, partly as a way of looking after their communities in the wake of the pandemic, and also with all the very many other benefits that can bring, like tourism and economic development, employment, and better conditions for artists in the district. So what we started with was mapping provision across the district and in the wider Cumbria region, and exploring development needs and opportunities. In parallel with that, Conrad was working with Howard Tompkins on options for Penrith Town Hall. So all of these strands are now starting to come together. So the mapping process involved meeting the arts organisations and getting a sense of their strengths, needs and aspirations, and then feeding that back to EDC. Both giving them a sense of the distinctive strengths and needs of each organisation, and also looking at the commonalities across the sector. And then late last year, EDC moved to looking at investing a little bit more in the sector in preparation for LGR. We did a piece of work looking at the relative investment of the 3 Cumbria district councils, and Eden's was the lowest of the 3. So they were looking at bringing EDC's investment up closer to parity with Barrow and South Lakes in preparation for local government reorganisation, in the hope that that would then provide the baseline that the new authority would take forward. So we went back to the arts organisations, particularly the 5, we call them RFOs, even though they're not all regularly funded by EDC, but it's Blue Jam, Eden Arts, Evan, Highlights and Upfront. I think only John from Upfront's here on this call today. So we went back to the organisations, getting an update on what their needs and aspirations were, and talking about what a little bit of additional investment would do for them, what a meaningful figure would be in terms both of programme investment and building capacity, so that they will be more resilient in the future, even if this funding doesn't continue, that this will create a boost that can last, can have some legacy. And also not just about their own organisations, but also thinking about the individual artists and the communities that are part of their networks. And we proposed a funding framework to EDC involving a one-off funding boost to those 5 arts organisations and an open access fund that all arts organisations and community organisations creating work in the district could access. Alongside that, an economic development work stream had allocated 90,000 for animating town centres and focusing on tourism and youth employment. EDC have proposed an increased investment of 235,000 in 22-23, plus the 90,000 economic investment, plus the balance of the team programme, which at that time was 32,000, which also is boosted. Conrad's been doing a lot of additional fundraising alongside that to supplement that seed investment. And then there's the town hall. So there's actually quite a substantial amount of investment going into the arts and culture in this last year of EDC's existence. And when we looked at how to support the arts organisations, we were looking for something that was both meaningful and fair across the group. So the proposal is that each of the arts organisations has an injection of core funding in 22-23, and each of them had to come back to EDC saying, you know, how they would use that, both for programming and for increasing capacity and resilience in the future. That's now all gone to council, gone to cabinet, and as Conrad said, we're just in the call-in period, so it's not confirmed until we think Monday, but Kate Giggle from EDC is also on the call and can confirm or deny that. But that should be confirmed imminently, which meaning that the arts organisations can invest in their capacity, invest in their programme, and for those that are applying for NPOs or extending NPOs, it provides additional ballast for that, additional endorsement that will support that application. I think that's everything. Apologies for having to disappear in 5 minutes, but
that's all right.
I'm back to Conrad. And if I've forgotten anything, he can flag it.
Thanks, Deborah. Conrad? Come off mute, Conrad.
There's always somebody that does that, isn't there, on a meeting that stays on mute. I'll just talk a little bit about kind of the programme that we did in tandem as part of this kind of research. We wanted to kind of do a bit of action research. So we were fortunate we've been able to bring in an extra £142,000 worth of other investment to support the programme. And we started with a project over the summer that was funded by the Department for Education and the Half Holiday Activity Fund. And we concentrated that on Kirby Stephen because that's where the funding was available for. And we ran a host, kind of 4 weeks of activity ranging from photography through to craft, dance workshops, music workshops, creative writing, musical theatre, accessible music. And we worked with Evan, Eden Arts, Blue Jam, Sunbeams, as well as individual artists like Zoe Lee Gadd and Asha Richardson. And we also programmed a couple of actual performances. So we had, in partnership with Highlights, we hosted Opera North's family Magic Flute, I think it was Magic Flute, and also in partnership with Helen Eastman Bicycle Boy, which is an outdoor family-friendly bicycling musical that we also toured up to in partnership with Belfoot Forward up to Alston and over to Rose Hill in Whitehaven. And just for the workshop programme, we engaged with about 600 kids over that holiday period, which we thought was, some of it was a bit hit and miss. We had some sessions that were sold out, some that were poorly attended, but we were told that we did very well, which was reassuring because we thought we'd slightly underperformed. But the DFE were very happy with the fact that we'd reached to those students and kind of really had that kind of long-term kind of engagement with them. Then the second project that we did was through a company called Shared Experience, which is a national touring company that's now based in the Eden Valley. We made a new version of Sleeping Beauty, family show over the Christmas holidays that we did in partnership with the University of Cumbria. So we've been working with our students and some of their new graduates to make this show, and that toured around Cumbria. It was slightly stymied by COVID, so we performed in Cockermouth, Wigton, Alston, Appleby and Penrith, but then COVID got the better of us, and we had to pull the rest of the tour, which was to Whitehaven, Carlisle, Kendal, Kirkby Stephen and Millham. But what we did do was we digitally captured the performance. So we had the foresight to film the first performance, and then that was streamed digitally. And that has been seen by over 5,000 people across the world. We've had people in New Zealand watch that show, and we had about 3,000 people come to see the actual live performances. And it's something that we want to revive, should we be able to get additional funding for this autumn. So if there's anybody on there that would like Sleeping Beauty and their village hall, or community space, or their theatre, or any cafe, wherever it might be, do give us a shout. And again, that was great to take that work across Cumbria, and what was lovely is it was all pay what you decide. So all the performances were free to access. There was no kind of financial kind of upfront cost to that, and it was brilliant to see a really diverse audience and working with some of those venues to reach people in the community that wouldn't necessarily have thought to come to a theatre performance.
Okay.
And then we've recently just
completed. Draw you to a close in 30 seconds, Conrad.
That's fine. We've just done Swim, which we tested. A play by Liz Richardson that performed at Penrith Town Hall. So we're doing some tester events over the coming 6-9 months at Penrith Town Hall as part of our programme to work out what the use of that building might be. And again, we're also working with the Inspiring Eden programme around a creative entrepreneurs scheme. So we will send more information as we have it. And it will come your way. And if anybody's got any queries, just contact us directly.
Thank you very much. What a great program of stuff you've done, and great that Eden is supporting the arts and culture. I guess in the last year of Eden existing in the way that it is at the moment. Thank you, Conrad. Thank you, Deborah, for the updates, and well done. And hope it continues in the right direction. And Swim, which I think I've just been doing it down in Cornwall, haven't they? The open air theatre.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Yes, they were swimming with seals yesterday after the show.
I saw some pictures. Yeah, fantastic stuff. All right, lovely. Thank you ever so much, Conrad.
Thank you.
As I said, right, we've now got a treat for you, an audio treat for you, which Andrew Deakin is going to talk us through. But first of all, I'm going to invite you just to sit back, open your ears, and I'm going to start Andrew's presentation as we look at the Dawn Chorus and what is going on in Cumbria. Andrew, is there anything you want to say before I play that first slide?
Yeah, just very quickly. I realised about 3 o'clock this morning that this could become something like the sort of show your uncle gave you when he'd been on holiday in Scotland. But we will whip through the slides pretty quickly. Yeah, so let's have a listen, and then I'll tell you when to stop.
Okay.
Let's go to the next slide, Tom.
What beautiful sounds.
Of course, we could listen to that all day, but not today. I'm going to tell you about sound camps in general, and that image, together with the Dawn Chorus, is perhaps what you might think of what a sound camp looks and sounds like, especially when it's situated around Dawn Chorus Day. But it's not quite the case. So I'm going to explore what sound camps look like and sound like in the way we do them in Cumbria, but also in the way they're done around the world. And there's quite a lot of pictures to look at. So I'm going to try and, against all my better nature, not talk so much. The first sound camp, we were asked to run a sound camp in 2014. And we by an organisation in London called Sound Tent, who'd run a sound camp the previous year down in London. So we said, yeah, we'll do that. What is it? So they sent us some information and said how they did it. And we thought, that's brilliant. We'll do it in the park. where we're based. This is our building in the park before it was redeveloped this year. And we'll invite a couple of artists to come and lead, and we'll be able to camp in the garden. That'll be all right. There'll only be 7 or 8 of us. That'll be fine. Anyway, next slide, please. The day arrived, and so did the artists and some guests and punters. We went over to South Walney. If you've ever been to Walney, it can be very windy. That's why the wind farm's there. We chose a day where it rained on a biblical scale. This is before we got absolutely soaking wet, having walked 2 miles down to the other end of the island. Next slide. Anyway, we came back to the house. We sat around with artists and technology. We knew we were going to make a piece that we were going to broadcast later. That was part of the program for the day. Next slide. This is Jenny Dennett of Ulverston, BBC Radio Cumbria, interviewing the 2 artists that were there, Helmut Lemke and Lee Parkinson. We've had that link with BBC Cumbria ever since with the Soundcamps, which is rather nice. I was up at 11 o'clock last night just doing a quick interview. Next slide. And this is the live performance and broadcast of the piece we were making earlier in the day from sounds that we'd collected on Walney. And that was going out to various parts of the world through various, both FM and online radio stations. Next slide. It was still raining at this point, rather dramatically. So our idea is that we might broadcast the dawn chorus from the park seemed very slight. So about 11, later on in the evening, this must have been about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the evening, we set some microphones up in the house out of the windows, so at least we could catch something there. And the microphone on the left is pointing up into our loft, which has got at that time anyway, had a large family of squirrels. So we thought they might be able to join in. As it happens, next slide, please. We went to bed. Some of us went to bed anyway, scattered around the building in the offices and workshops. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Lee Patterson got out, put his microphones out it stopped raining by this time, put his microphones out in the park, and we were able to broadcast the live dawn chorus. Next slide. And this is the happy campers the morning after, some of whom got no sleep, but that's a sort of typical end to a sound camp. Happy, smiley people. Next slide. So, having learned a bit from the first one, we held another sound camp at Ulverston. This time we set off by deciding that we wouldn't camp outside, we would camp inside. Next slide. So we took over a room at Forage Park, which some of you will know. The left-hand picture is a picture of the room as it was set up, somewhere to eat, somewhere to sleep, books and bits of writing materials, drawing materials. And on the left is one of the artists that we invited to run this session, Helen Frosty, from an organisation called Sound Fjord in London. And during the weekend, we were doing a piece of networked writing with other groups, other sound camps around the world. So it was an online writing activity, which was really quite interesting. The other artist that was in residence there was Josephine Dickinson, who some of you know is the most fantastic poet. She's a brilliant musician. She's a shepherd, lives up at Alston, and she was there as well. And Helen and Josephine had organised all the activities. Next slide, please. We went for a walk. That's always something that happens on sound camps. We went for a walk up the Hoard for a couple of hours, 3 hours maybe. We collected things. We made recordings, but recording doesn't just mean doing audio recordings. It means drawing, writing, collecting. And we brought them back and we started to make some work around that. Next slide. We also did quite a lot of talking. Sound camps are about that as well. They're about meeting new people and talking about listening, ecology, all sorts of things. And that's Josephine on the left with a typical red hat. On the right there is a piece of technology that we use to stream audio live around the world. And picking up on some of the things that we've talked about earlier, it's a piece of really cheap technology, a Raspberry Pi. Some of you will recognize it, with a sound card on it. We've been developing this since 2015. Gradually, it's become more sophisticated. And that's me just showing the group how we're going to broadcast the Dawn Chorus from a remote field about a mile away. Next slide. You've got to eat, so you might as well eat around a big table. Next slide. This is just an example of some of the writing that Josephine did. She ended up with a piece of work with 18 passages in it, slightly based on some of John Cage's work. It's the most delightful piece of writing, and she did this over the weekend. Whilst she was also leading workshops and you know, doing the activities. Next slide. And this is we had to walk in the morning, get up about 4 o'clock, and we walked about a mile to this wood where we listened to a typically fantastic dawn chorus. Next slide. Next sound camp was on South Walney, and this time we did camp, which was really interesting. We've had 2 sound camps on South Walney. It's a great place to do it. It's a bit wild. The first year we did it, we had minus degree temperatures. I had visions of waking people up in the morning and some of them not actually waking up. It's one of those health and safety things we didn't really imagine we might have to deal with. I think that's Dan Fox on the top of the hill with his parabolic microphone. And it was great to camp. The camping bit is something that really does seem part of what we should be doing at sound camps. Next slide. This is one of my favorite photographs. On the right is Maya Bugge, a Norwegian cellist and composer, and she'd written a piece of work that used the sounds of South Walney, including the bird sound. And she worked with one of her students who lives in Barrow, Bev Padden, on the left, who, apart from being an extraordinarily good cellist and bassoonist, is also a fantastic plumber. That's her day job, is a plumber. So a couple of weeks later, we got her into the house in the park to come and sort our rather dodgy female toilet out. And it was fantastic. The sun was out. There's a crowd of 12, 15 people sat in front, listening to this fantastic new work, which then went on to get performed in London and Lancaster and various other places and still exists. Next slide, please. Rêver. I don't like this word, partly because I always think it says reveal, and you always have to spell it for people when you say rêver. But rêver is the network that we stream to when we're streaming the dawn choruses, and you can listen to Rêver from some Saturday morning to Sunday morning online at that website down at the bottom of the slide there, and it allows you to listen to the dawn chorus as it's picked up by those often Raspberry Pi based open microphones, and we follow the sunrise, the dawn, which happens before the dawn chorus, which happens before sunrise, as you probably know. We follow that around the world. So you can listen to 24 hours worth of dawn choruses. Again, on that website, you can also listen to various activities and get involved in conversations and discussions that are also part of Rêver. Next slide, please. And these are the open microphones, or some of them, that form part of Rêver, but they also form part of a network called that's run by an organisation called Locus Sonus in the south of France, and we're on there somewhere. There's quite a few in Cumbria. Next slide. So to the Soundcamp at Drigg, Ravenglass tomorrow. I can tell you a little bit about that. There may be 1 or 2 places left on it. If anyone wants to get in touch with me, I'll tell you how to do that in a second. Next slide, please. So we'll be doing a sound camp. No camping this time. We couldn't find anywhere reasonable to camp near where we wanted to do it. So we'll be looking for somewhere next year where we can camp. It's really strangely difficult to find places in Cumbria where you can camp without having to also deal with other campers who are doing various other things. So if anyone's got a piece of land where they wouldn't mind us camping at some point, we'll bring a sound camp to your area. If you want to come tomorrow, if you write to me at info@fonfestival.org this morning, I can send you info and see whether you we've got a place for you. But we're going to meet at Drigg railway station. All the day has been organised around the tides and the train timetable. So we're meeting at Drigg railway station around 12 noon. And then we're going for a guided walk for about a mile or so. And we end up in a sheltered place on Drigg Dunes. And there'll be activities led by 3 artists. Next slide, please. The first one is Nat Sharp, who originally from Workington. She'll be performing, for reasons that will become clear, Mutia, which is a dance from the Seychelles, which is traditionally danced around a bonfire, but has huge amounts of significance to Natalie. Next slide, please. Alex Metcalf, who's a concert pianist and amongst many other things, will be performing a piece with all those things there, drawing from the sound of songs of birds coming to Ravenglass. Yeah, I haven't heard any of this yet, so it'll be a surprise to all of us. Alex is a remarkable musician. We're having, because there's no power on Drigg Dunes, who'd have thought, all of this is driven by battery powered instruments. And the final artist is R.L. Wilson. Some of you will know R.L. Wilson. He might be on this call. And he's channeling the spirit of Major Rose, who was the first warden of the nature reserve at Drigg. Next slide. And of course, none of this happens without help and support from all sorts of people, really, but in particular Arts Council England and the Creative Europe programme. And we were one of the last organisations to get funding from Creative Europe post-Brexit. And the 2 images are some of the graphics that are done around this project called Acoustic Commons. That's the sound tent, obviously, and the one on the right is clearly a stream box. Anyway, thanks for listening.
Andrew, thank you. What an amazing project. And I love the fact it comes back year after year. I hope it's a beautiful day for you, and may the birds sing loudly and everything else.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm conscious of time. I'm going to ask for 5 minutes more. Emily, I'm sorry that you're at 10:30 rather than 10:25, but Emily Edwards is from the Knotted Project, and as well as the Soundcamp stuff going on at the weekend and many other things across the county, there's a wonderful new festival taking place at Windermere Jetty on Sunday called the Forage Festival. Emily, give us 4.5 minutes on the Forage Festival. Off you go.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. So hi, everyone. Lovely to be here. I'm Emily from the Knotted Project, and I'm here to tell you about Forage Festival. Like Tom said, it's happening this Sunday, the 1st of May at Windermere Jetty Museum from sort of 11 a.m. till around sort of 5 p.m. So Forage Festival is the Knotted Project's first arts festival, and it's been created with and for young people across Cumbria. So it's really young person led, and we're really excited for this festival because nothing quite like this has ever happened in Cumbria before. So the project focuses on well-being, young person's talent development, and also helping young people to emerge from the pandemic feeling inspired, creative, and capable of shaping their futures as well. So we've worked with 3 groups from across Cumbria as part of the project. So those have been the Knotted Project Young Company, who have worked in Windermere, Young Carers South Lakes, who have worked in Kendal, and also Forge Youth Dance Company, who have worked in Keswick with Theatre by the Lake. And they've all worked with the Knotted Project and professional artists over 4 months to create a performance piece with the theme, The Future Fight, so all about their future and what it means to them. which has been really exciting. We've also worked with an emerging artist called Mina. She's created her own solo dance piece. She's worked alongside a spoken word artist. So they're the 4 pieces that are going to be performed. The young people have also worked with a filmmaker throughout the process, sort of reflecting on their process and what the future means to them. That film is also going to be shown at the festival. We've also worked with a steering group who've worked with sort of the production and the planning of the festival, so it's like really young person led. And we've also worked with some really amazing partners, and we couldn't have made this project happen without their support. It's been funded by Arts Council England, and we've worked with local partners including Lakeland Arts, Windermere Jetty Museum, Theatre by the Lake, Way Forward, who are a local young people's mental health charity, Tully House, Great Place Lakes and Dales, Brewery Arts Centre, and many more. We've also worked with a therapist, Sarah Fairweather, as part of Way Forward, and she's supported the young people's mental health and wellbeing alongside the project, which we think has been, you know, really valuable emerging from the pandemic. So you can book your tickets on the Windermere Jetty Museum website. So if you go onto their website, click on tickets, scroll down to the bottom where it says Forage Festival. Standard tickets are £9 and they include free entry into the boat museum. There's also a discount for under 25s. Those tickets are £7. We thought that was really important with it being a young person-led festival. And we'd really encourage you to come along and support our young people who've worked so hard over the last 4 months. It's going to be a really exciting day of creativity, pop-up performances, all young person led. Like I say, nothing quite like this has ever happened in Cumbria before. So we're really excited about it. So it's this Sunday at Windermere Jetty Museum, and we hope to see you there. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Emily. I shall see you there. I'm going down there for 11 o'clock on Sunday. Looking forward to it and talking to people there as well. Thank you for whistle stop tour of that. Sounds great. Congratulations on putting it together. One of the things the network is trying to do is support young Cumbrian creatives as much as we can. And I think this is a great example of that. And well done to the Knotted Project for pulling that together and all those partners that you're working with as well.